So now we have full tack and starting to actually lunge. I like to take my time, obviously, but I don't ever want the horse to feel wrong for moving forward. So he may bolt off, he may jump forward, he may try to change directions. All of those things are kind of like inevitable at this stage. So I try to stay really understanding, and I try to keep them close until they understand a little bit more about how to handle themselves. So you'll see me kind of keep the circle a little small, and then as he needs more room, I will drift out. So this is also Raz's first time wearing a saddle. It's one of the reasons why I like to start off with accepting the rider, because it makes the saddle a little less dramatic too. I think another thing that can help is wearing blankets. People don't think about that as being helpful for their training, but it really is. So when they get stuck like that, I make sure that I put all of the rhythm behind him, and I try and make the front door very open. I also like traveling with the horse, especially at this stage of training, because I can walk with him and keep him a little closer to me. And that can just be a little bit more beneficial to him. If I'm standing still, I kind of get the feeling that the horse feels like they should be standing still. So I kind of like to walk around and give them the idea that, yes, they're supposed to be moving forward. So that can happen with the first canter under saddle. There's definitely a buck in this little guy, or not so little. And I don't really like to think of it as something that I want to go in and find, but I do want to expose that tendency. So again, like, my goal is to travel with them when they have those reactions, not to shut it down. So I always want to feel like I am helping them find a way forward and not just making them stop having a quote-unquote misbehavior, because at this point in the game, he honestly doesn't know that what he's doing is a disobedience. So I just try and send him back forward and find a way to get out of it. So there was a little bit more normal canter strides. So we're on to change of direction. Kind of getting my lunge line together. And again, I want to stay close. I don't want to have a whole bunch of rope out there just in case he cuts back in on me, as the young horses do. So I will try to keep my rope at a good length, but then be able to walk around in my own circle inside of his circle. So that was a little bit more normal canter, even though it was the counter lead. I'm fine with that. I just want him to know that he has 3 gaits that he can achieve. So it's interesting with horses that have a little bit of a buck in them. You end up having to use the snap with the whip more often, I've found. So I'm making that like bull snap sound with the end of the whip, and then he reacted and got this nice canter, which I was super pleased with. Again, for his first time lunging, first time walk trot canter, and with the saddle, I thought that was great. He obviously has a pretty good stop. So this is something that I really like to do with all of the young horses, is ground driving from the saddle. I don't actually like ground driving all the way behind them, because at some point they need to feel really connected to me. So this is how I like to introduce the rein aids and turning and being able to stop. I use all of my same vocal commands. We'll go back to that on another day as well. So this is another day lunging, another little bit of bucking around, but you can see there where I let the rope kind of lengthen out and I let him go forward out of it. The more I can get him to understand that he needs to go forward out of a quote-unquote disobedience, the easier it will be later on in his life when those situations kind of pop up. So that's a little bit better canter. And again, at this point on the lunge, it is literally just about like helping him find out how to move his legs under the saddle. The stirrups, I like to have them down like this because them being loose on his sides is going to feel far worse than my leg will when I am riding him full time. So it's kind of a desensitization tool. And then I use my vocal commands. I click once rhythmically, like for trot transition, like walk to trot.
Yes.
And then if I'm going trot to canter, I like to sync it up with the outside hind leg. So like if I was asking for it, then I would go with each land of the outside hind leg so that I'm synced with the correct beat of the canter rhythm. So here we are ground driving again. This is his second day doing it.
Good boy.
And right there we actually had a bug fly right up his nose, so that was interesting. Kind of lost a little bit of confidence there, and you see that in how we're going around, because I was actually asking with the right rein for him to turn right. So I'm using that 4/4 yield pressure with my left hand on his neck, and then I've got my right rein in my right hand over his neck to kind of verify, yes, we are turning to the right. So if they get stuck, I can always go back to my yields. And again, like I want to teach the horse that I want them to go forward freely. So I am going to have these reins pretty long at this stage of the game, because I want them to learn how to do basically their own self-carriage in this moment, which is It can have their face anywhere that they want to. It's in their natural balance, and I just need a normal walk around the arena. And I am basically just trying to match their stride length while I'm walking beside them. And then when I ask for a stop transition, I always use a ho ho, and that is the same lunging and it is the same ground driving as well. So this again, back to lunging. He's really starting to learn to carry himself. So right there he had to stop. And again, I tried to drift with him. I tried to keep the rhythm out behind him. I don't really like it when they like slam on the brakes down from the canter, because I think that can get you into kind of a sticky situation once you're on their backs. So even if he's going to come all the way down to a stop, I still want to have the canter, trot, walk, stop kind of transition at this stage of the game. And we're going for a little bit of a tear. Again, I want the lunge line to drift, and I want the correction to be always forward. I'm not going to care if it's the counter lead, if he's cross-firing. I just want him to know that just because he kind of like flew off in that transition doesn't mean that I'm never going to ask him to go forward again. Like, he needs to learn how to go forward without overreacting to the forward aid. Or even if it feels like it's a correcting aid, then he needs to remember that it's got to be a response, not just a reaction. So we're a little bit like hyped up, obviously. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna like bring him back in and slow him back down. Like, I really want him to understand that there's nothing wrong with going forward. In fact, I like him going forward. And so this is a lot better canter on this circle, much more balanced. And the tempo stayed mostly the same. Yes, it got quick and a little bit long, but at this point, I'll take it for sure. So they can have those moments of overreaction. I just want to make sure that my response to their reacting quickly is just stay with me and keep finding your way forward. And again, I'm going to travel with my young horses. I know a lot of schools of thought have you standing very still. And while I do want to know exactly where I am in the arena, I don't just want to be drifting, for all of eternity. But I do want to allow them to find their own balance, and oftentimes that means that I cannot be rigid in where my own balance is. So he took the counter lead the first time. He's getting a little quick this time. All of those things just need to equalize themselves out, and I need to be able to let him expose himself to all of those different feelings so that he knows exactly what response feels the best before I even get into the tack. Like, can he learn that just keeping the same tempo into and out of the gates is the most comfortable thing for him to do? And then my job sitting on him and doing it becomes a whole lot easier. I'm not using side reins on him just because we have not, first of all, he has not gotten his wolf teeth removed yet. And second of all, I think sometimes the side reins can actually prohibit them from going forward. So I want that to be first priority right now. And later on, I will probably introduce the side reins. I am not opposed to them at this stage of training. But this is how I like to start. So again, back to the ground driving. I think this is one of the most beneficial things that I can do at this point in his life because it's very low stress. Like I can take him out onto straighter lines. I can stay in the walk. I can do this all over the property, to be honest, and can teach him all about like, don't get your front end stuck. Like we just had that reminder there with the forehand yield. And this is why those yields are so important, because you always fall back on them. And if one of them is broken, you will find out about it at some point in your horse's life. Again, I like the longer the rein as possible. Right now is what I'm after. Later on, I will get a little shorter and just ask him to yield it within a specific frame space, but I don't want to do that too soon because I don't just want to teach him a headset and get myself in trouble later on. So again, I don't care where his face goes. I just need him to start to understand, like, I can tell you to go right and I can tell you to go left and I can ask you to stop, all from this spot where the saddle is. And I'm going to try and stay right in time with his footfall because that will help him relax a little bit. So there he like pushed in towards me. So that's why I used the forehand to yield away right before we halted there and came over to the mounting block. Just because I like to address anything that pushes into my personal bubble pretty quickly. And most of the time it's going to be with a forehand yield, hindquarter yield, rein back, or pull down. So this is the first time that I'm putting any weight into the saddle, that I'm using a stirrup to mount up on. I'm kind of making noise with the stirrup leather against the saddle on the offside. Lots and lots of rubbing. And again, my goal at this point is not to get on, but just to have him accept my weight and how it feels now that the saddle is on. Because I have the bridle on and I know that left and right yielding to the bit is not 100%, and my stopping is not 100%, I am not going to get on because I want to make sure that I have all of those pieces in place before I set foot in the stirrup, because I want him to feel confident being able to move forward. I don't really like to start them in a small corral because I want to be able to push them forward. I think that's a huge important aspect of starting them. So here we are. Good start.